Ratling Gunners are unquestionably one of the strongest units in campaign for Skaven. In multiplayer, they're not quite as ubiquitous, but they are definitely still a pretty common pick in a number of matchups. Against the newly buffed Dwarfs, this matchup definitely got a lot easier for the Dwarfs. I do think it's maybe still slightly Skaven favored, but I've been having some discussions with some various people watching some games, and this one is actually from early access. Myself versus Turin here. Never had a chance to bring this one to you guys, so here it is. I've got Ikit Claw leading the way against the two new Dawi engineers and their gyrocopters. We've got 4 gyros. On my side, of course, the Teeth Breakers, running around Ratling Guns. Also got the Dwarf Thing Menace Doom Flayers. Lots of Death Runners, as is also obligatory against Dwarfs. We've got 5 in total, including the Regiment of Renown. 2 of them are in the far corners, ready for some action. Plague Priest as well. We've also got a Chieftain, give some physical resistance to either Ikit and or the Plague Priest. A bunch of Skaven Slave Slingers as well. There's a couple of Bugman's Rangers and Deep Vanguard also for Turin. He's got, again, the 2 Engineers, Iron Drakes, plenty of Dwarf Warriors, Miners with Blasting Charges, and then just these regular Steam Gyrocopters. So back to the Teeth Breakers. I'm going to pop their Concealment Bombs. That is one of their Regiment of Renown abilities. In general, Teeth Breakers, or sorry, Ratling Guns, they're sort of your mid-range option for AP missiles, right? You've got the super long range of Warp Lightning Cannons, you've got the semi-long range of your Jezzails. Ratling Guns are mid-range at 145 with insane DPS. Lots of volume of fire. Each shot does relatively little damage, but you can see 18 shots per volley with a 3.5 reload second time for the Regiment of Renown. Essentially an unlimited fire rate. So we're going to lock this down with Howling Warp Gale. They emerge from their concealment bombs and just open up, along with Ikit using his Doom Wheel to shoot and zap up in the air. Of course, does triple damage when compared to a normal Doom Wheel's shooting. But already those Steam Gyros had basically wrecked completely one unit of Death Runners. Likewise, the Chieftain running in here with another unit of actually Plague Monks here, just getting absolutely roasted. Blasting Charges have also taken a pretty serious toll. Mostly I've been able to catch the Blasting Charges with the Skaven Slaves, which is great, but a nice Fiery Ring of Thori here is also going to do great damage against the Vixtren's Death Squad. Also uses the Flash Bomb, significantly nerfs their melee defense. Still at 30 after that nerf, though, which is pretty good stuff. Obviously, the Gyro's been seen away. One actually gets immediately shattered because it takes so much HP damage from the Teeth Breakers. Actually, no models lost, but yeah, some more Vanguard Miners coming in to try and break this up here. Ikit goes after the Bugman's Rangers out on the flank. Don't want him getting mixed up with this character squad if I can avoid it. Going 3v1. More Death Runners moving in various positions. One had moved in and just completely ripped apart those Iron Drakes. Swing and a miss on the Rune of Wrath and Ruin, but hey, we were still kind of getting a feel for the timings of spells on this. Dwarf Thing Menace still holding the center, and now I've got an opportunity to open up. You can see at this long distance, they can actually fire over the heads of these Skaven Slaves, and granted, this is not 100% flat. I think they might have a slight elevation advantage, but if they're like right behind the other chaff units, whatever's protecting them, they likely won't be able to fire over them, but with a good distance behind, you can see here they are holding Miners trying to break through, Bugman's Rangers trying to break through. I'm doing whatever I can to keep them protected. Shooting Miners isn't the best value necessarily, but hey, they're the most imminent threat to the Teeth Breakers themselves. Meanwhile, Thorek falling back with his Engineers here. Both have taken some pretty substantial damage, but they're going to try and form up a pocket here and just buy more time, honestly, for the Gyrocopters to do their work. They are working down now some more Death Runners here. My Death Runners have actually taken a pretty substantial amount of damage. Balance of power is pretty close. Summon Plague Monks go down there. So yeah, I'm not really using my Skaven Slave Slingers much at all, but that's fine. Who says we really need them at this point, right? Anyway, the Gyros will continue firing. Thorek moving through. The Engineers also get set and start firing. They're going to shoot at Ikit. Rune of Slowness on him. Help keep him in, fireable position. I'm going to park him right under the Gyros. Again, try and shoot up in the air. He chooses to shoot, whatever else, which happens to actually be the Death Runners. But the Death Runners do move in and now start taking out Engineer. Again, beautiful fiery Ring of Thori to try and protect. Thorek also moves into melee here. One more Howling Warp Gale, though. We're going to lock those Gyros in place. Flash Bomb and Rune of Speed stacked momentarily there, but then both wear off. And I'm able to get away with Ikit. Teethbreakers are still a little bit busy. They've actually taken some damage in the meantime from some of these Bugman's Rangers. Shooting them, actually just run the Skaven Slaves into melee with the Bugman's Rangers and then start focusing them with these others here just to deal damage and keep them bogged down. Dwarfling Menace also going to sweep back there, try and finish things. Speaking of finish, Death Runners move in, Chieftain and Plague Priest, which I believe has base physical resistance already, so with the Guardian there, I believe, yeah, Plague Priest getting knocked around a little bit. Oh, and the charge of the Gyros also knocking him down further. Yeah, I guess he doesn't have physical resistance baseline. I'm mistaken there. He gets a summon off, gets more numbers in here, more Death Runners moving in as well, so this should be the end of Thoric and the Gyros, although these Death Runners are pretty low. Just in general, the Weeping Blade here debuffing armor allows the Clan Rats to actually get some pretty decent hits. And the Teethbreakers come in for one last volley, opening up. Their anti-air ability is what makes them so good in this matchup. Like, Giselles are okay at dealing with Gyros at longer distance, but the pure DPS, and not to mention the suppression effect that I haven't really mentioned too much here, a significant speed debuff, 35% speed, which you can, of course, layer with other speed debuffs when playing as Skaven. You know, Blessed with Filth to get poison on these guys, on their missile attacks, you know, other things, Toxic Rain, what have you, snare nets. Really, though, just this in and of itself is pretty good. You can see it takes the Gyros down to only 69 speed, which is still pretty fast, but definitely helps you control their movements a little bit better. And since they're kind of the Dwarfs' only mobile units, I really like the Gyros specifically, or sorry, them for countering Gyros. The Teethbreakers specifically, that Concealment Bombs helps them not get lit up by, say, like Grudge Throwers or Dwarven Artillery in general. Grudge Throwers can be a little bit dangerous to weapons teams, and I didn't really have that many tools of dealing with them here other than the Vanguarded Death Runners potentially getting an ambush. But anyway, at this point we pulled ahead on the balance of power. Both my heroes get routed. I think the Plague Priest might get straight up killed here. Nope, he manages to escape. More shooting from Ikit. Teethbreakers using up the last of their ammunition shooting Thorek. You can see they're decently accurate. I mean, they're not super accurate, especially out at the longer part of their range, using up the last of their ammunition there. Kind of the closer they are, the more percentage of their shots that they will hit up to a point. So it's definitely beneficial to try and get close within range, you know, for certain high-value targets, but more so for the regular Ratling Gunners, I would say. The Teethbreakers' increased accuracy from being an ROR definitely gives them some advantage. Ikit here just blasting away and routing off the last of the Dawi heroes. So very fun thematic match, well played to turn. And I do feel this matchup is a little bit easier for Dwarfs. Like, that was actually pretty legitimately close, and I would consider this maybe not a 100% competitive build, but a relatively competitive build. I mean, like the Flayers, the Ratling Guns, the Death Runner, like max Death Runners, I guess only 4. I might have said 5 earlier. One of them was secretly a Plague Monk, but I mean, the Death Runners all, you can see why they're so common of a pick here. Very easy for them to pay for themselves. They are pretty squishy to things like Gyros, blasting charges. Now with the ammo refills and the slows, they're more vulnerable to that stuff than ever. But still a very powerful tool here. Ratling Guns providing the anti-air just generate huge value shooting down the Gyros and doing damage to various minor units and whatnot. Pretty good kill total there, so definitely a key tool here. And a useful tool in other matchups as well. Generally, I mean, Giselles, Warp Lightning Cannons, and Ratling Gunners, all of those are reasons why people typically don't take large armored monsters into Skaven. Skaven are seen as kind of a counter-monster faction in many ways because of that. But we'll talk more about that in just a second. Dwarfling Menace didn't quite pay for itself, but it's just kind of here as well. Skaven Slave Slingers, pretty decent value. I mean, they're only 200 points, and basically all 3 of them pay for themselves, so that's not too bad. For Turin, Thoric's pretty solid pick. Thoric Double Engineer might be the way to go here. I'm not 100% sure. You might want actually 2 Rune Casters, or perhaps a Fighting Lord. I'm not 100% sure. Again, I need to kind of play around with this matchup a little bit myself and see, but definitely the Gyros are pretty key. And I would say at least 1 engineer to be refilling ammo on said Gyros is pretty important. Blasting Charge is also very solid here. They can get good value as long as they don't use their charges on complete chaff. But generally pretty good stuff. Iron Drakes did get collapsed pretty hard, but they got a little bit of value. Bugman's Rangers I also like the idea of. They actually get a lot of kill totals without getting much value, end up fighting a lot of chaff. But yeah, fairly solid stuff. So In terms of comparisons, it's a little bit interesting, you know, because Ratling guns are a weapon team, they're somewhat functionally different in terms of their missile damage, although in use case they are somewhat like, you know, handgunners or thunderers. But let's go ahead and take a look here. Got the base version and the teeth breakers. Only $850 for the base version, $1050 for the teeth breakers, which I do think in some matchups where you want the concealment bombs to protect from enemy artillery primarily, it is quite useful. Also protecting against cavalry, but in general, against the really like super fast mobile factions, it's hard to use Ratling guns in multiplayer. Stuff like Wood Elves, Beastmen, those very top-tier speed factions, it's going to be tricky. The slower factions, though, again, Dwarfs being the slowest. You could also say Lizardmen, Tomb Kings in many respects. It's a lot easier to use the Ratling guns because because of the speed debuffs and various other things. You can control enemy mobility and keep them safe from cavalry attacks without allocating too many resources to protecting them. So obviously with Skaven, I mean, you do have a lot of resources, but like, you know, your Skaven Slave Spears aren't really going to protect Ratling guns from a concerted Centaur and Hound attack, for example, right? So, generally also, a couple of the factions I just mentioned, Tomb Kings, Lizardmen specifically, large armored monsters, right? That are, again, relatively slow. Tomb Kings, it'll be a bit tough with the Tomb Kings chariots now being pretty strong. I'd be curious to see how that ends up playing out in this matchup. You're definitely going to want some mass or, I mean, obviously you still have like the hard snare of grinders, right? Warp grinders, which I think are really strong right now because of the changes to AoE effects. Bugs, one might say, to AoE effects. But still probably pretty solid against Tomb Kings. I mean, it's not like Skeleton Chariots have much HP. If you can open up a volley on them, or a few volleys with the Ratling guns, they'll tear them apart pretty quickly. I mean, 4,400 HP on 9 unit models isn't a whole lot of model per HP for a chariot, especially. So yeah, Tomb Kings definitely, Lizardmen, Dwarfs obviously be the primary factions I would think about. Other factions like Empire is an interesting one. Their heavy cavalry is now some of the slowest in the game, and I mean they have some fast mobile units, but more likely they might try and countershoot you. It's a little bit interesting. I mean, Empire can kind of go in a number of different directions, so you may not end up having the greatest targets to fire at, but even something like WARHAMMER, which he does have some missile resistance, 15% is really not too much, honestly, and given that Ratling guns do not do magic damage like a lot of other Skaven missile units do, you do not have to worry about his again, magic resistance, so it can help deal some extra DPS to Volkmar and you know, tear him down quicker, help control his movements and everything, but it's not necessarily as necessary. Yes, great sentence. Against the Empire, it's not as common of a pick, I guess. You see it once in a while, but Empire shooting also, like, they're kind of mid-range shooting, like they can pull up with a bunch of crossbowmen and kind of out-volume the Ratling guns, so you run into some interesting situations. They're generally in matchups where you get countershot by a lot of volume, like Empire and Bretonnia are good examples, sometimes Greenskins as well if they bring a lot of archer-type units. Sometimes the Ratling guns, you know, they get outnumbered significantly, and because they are very low HP, they do have 70 armor, but very low HP and higher value than something like a Peasant Archer, for example. Like, Peasants literally can go 2-on-1, right, with Ratling guns, and Ratling guns just aren't going to win that, especially at kind of the max range, given that Archer units, like Peasant Bowmen, will outrange them generally, right? What is it, 160? Yeah, not that big of a difference, but Peasant Archers at that max range will be hitting a lot more of their shots than the Ratling Gunners will. So hopefully you guys got something out of this. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. See you next time.